Day 900 of Russia's 3-day invasion of Ukraine, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So, starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently, Russia sits on more than 590,000 military personnel losses, representing an additional 1,220 in the past day. Then as for hardware losses, 6 tanks, 13 APVs, a whopping 58 artillery, and 1 helicopter. So headed straight to the map as the armed forces of Ukraine continue their military operations into bordering Kursk and other regions of Russia, which I'll get to in a moment, as Ukraine continues the momentum of going deeper and deeper into Russia. And just a quick note, this mapping system is woefully out of date, so once again I'll be throwing up some different maps today. Because, as current, the armed forces of Ukraine have created a maximum breach of 60 kilometers wide on the Kursk front, with an advance in depth of at least 30 plus kilometers. Ukraine also currently controls 530 square kilometers of land, represented by the orange here, with an additional grey zone area of 320 square kilometers in the yellow, amounting to a total area of 850 square kilometers, which is about 330 square miles of problems for the Russian army. And that's likely conservative figures right now based on all the new activity that we're seeing. Take, for instance, in the incursions eastern direction, we saw Ukrainian forces previously take the settlement of Gaevo, with now released older footage and images showing the Ukrainian flag erected there. Then, just beyond that point, the Ukrainian forces confirmed control of Plikovo. In fact, this whole area southeast of Sudzha, known as the Belovsky district, has reportedly been tapped into by this AFU incursion, with Russian media suggesting this could be a significant breakthrough attempt, with Ukrainian troops potentially advancing further. Take, for instance, Ukrainian forces were spotted near Belitsa, which is almost exactly 16 kilometers or 10 miles directly east of Plikovo. Then, not too far away, but further south from there, at Kucherov, with a reported new point of entry by the Ukrainian forces right here, which makes it advantageous for the AFU to make new in-routes into the Belovsky district, with Ukrainian reconnaissance groups extending up the road to that region. Then headed back to Sudzha as Ukraine took control of the settlement of Makhnovka, just to its southeast. Then after that, Ukrainian troops were seen on the outskirts of most of Sudzha for the enacting of a possible encirclement. Then just moments ago, Sudzha was said to be firmly under Ukrainian control, although those are extremely fresh reports right now, which came at the same time as a report about a nearby Russian Molva 152mm SPG destroyed. And these Russian SPGs are brand new. But Russia only has about a dozen of these prototypes, with incredibly slow and ongoing delays on the manufacturing floor. Then looking into the northeast sector of the main incursion, as Ukrainian forces are present in the Koronevo area of Kursk, with Ukrainian forces getting control of Zuravli to its east, and with ongoing counterattacks at Snegost, with the AFU possibly extending further beyond that. And somewhere near to here, we also saw yet another group of Russian POWs, and reportedly these ones are more conscripts. We also saw some more Russian flags being taken down, with some Ukrainian flags put up in the Sverdlikovo settlement, although I do expect that to be older footage now. Ukrainian forces are also pushing head-on into Kraglenko, advancing under Russian fire with taking partial control. And then to somewhat bypass and go north of this region, Ukrainian forces were noted moving towards the areas of Lgov and Kurchatov of which is where the Kursk nuclear power plant is located, with the current word being in this region that Russia is digging in with defenses with the use of non-military civilian excavators to protect their nuclear power plant and thus their energy security from a capturer. Then headed all the way down to another new incursion point by the AFU at Poroz, which isn't even the Kursk Oblast. This is Belgorod, with, as we see here, Ukrainian and Georgian Legion flags putting that achievement on display. But also at the location of Koloty Lovka of Belgorod, with Ukrainian forces said to be holding new positions here, evidently not satisfied with taking Russia's Kursk region. With this highly motivated Ukrainian army who reportedly began moving into the Belgorod Oblast, and if that wasn't enough, we also have Bezymeno, another incursion point of Belgorod, with clashes reported, and with small Ukrainian groups operating in this theatre. So these adjacent to Kursk AFU operations into various regions of the Belgorod Oblast is a move by the AFU likely aimed at expanding their operational reach, leading to the effect of really keeping the Russian forces on their toes, making it difficult for them to determine where to defend against this abrupt series of incursions. Oh, and in all of this, Ukraine also captured some hardware kit as well there, so including a T-62 and T-72 Russian main battle tank. But then there was the outright loss of hardware for the Russian forces, with their very own side reporting another Ka-52 loss, their most advanced attack helicopter, which must be rapidly descending in fleet numbers by this point, from about 100 before the large-scale invasion of Ukraine, down to possibly 30 as of now, with a portion of which would be not considered combat ready, and others would be used for spare parts. Of course, no military aircraft fleet ever has a 100% combat operational rate. So looking more broadly on the map, the Ukrainian armed forces have clearly stepped up their rate of attacks and maintained a sustained set of activities up until this date. The only question might be, where will the AFU come in from next? We may even see a master strategic move just like this, coming from the west of the main Kursk incursion point, leading to major swaths of land being captured by the AFU. Of course, this is all up to their military intelligence to decide. No doubt with the use of satellites and reconnaissance drones to identify Russian defenses or indeed lack thereof. And speaking of which, then to look at the Russian military response, apart from setting up defenses at their nuclear power plant, as there were more instances of Russian military personnel showing some real-time footage of the movements of a new column on their social networks. Which, real-time, that's not ideal for operational security. With apparent targeting of this latest column, which I'm looking for some further imagery on that front for. Although, do note, this looks to be mostly trucks carrying soldiers, with this crew lacking the sufficient heavy armor, it would seem. And I take it that these guys probably don't know what happened to the first two column deliveries, or were told that the first column is already in Berlin, and the second column is having a Victory Day parade in Kyiv. But as for military engagements with these two armies in Kursk, in Russia, I suspect nighttime military engagements must be terrifying for the Russian army, where the other side has night vision and the Russian side largely does not. Once again, we can thank corrupt oligarchs and their bogus military contract fulfillments for that one. Oh, and something else, because although I'm not finding a great deal of activity from the Russian side, as current, we did also see one example of a Russian soldier happily onlooking to the Russian Grad multiple rocket launcher, possibly shooting into some small Russian town or settlement. But what's worse is that these are unguided rockets. There's nothing precise about them. They're designed for blanketing an area, which was even more confusing for the video we saw here, as this one only let off 5 rockets, out of a would-be total capacity of 40 for the Grad rockets, with some Russian sources suggesting that these rocket artillery munitions are not in unlimited supply, thus making for Russian Grad launchers shooting off about half with any salvo instead, half of the 40 capacity. But with this example, it's not even half, but an eighth. Then also the next closest thing that I could find to Russian tanks rolling up was neighbouring country Belarus, who showed footage of tanks and other armoured vehicles move into areas bordering with Ukraine, but no doubt mostly for show. So all of these events can have a profound impact for what the battlefield will look like into the future. Because just imagine the need for a fully concerted change in Russian strategy to protect their own territory. For example, if Russia moves a large volume of active units from eastern Ukraine to Kursk to better defend hundreds of miles of Russian land. Now, I'm getting a bit ahead of myself there, but given the amount of land Ukraine almost took overnight, it makes for the situation whereby it's surely 10x more embarrassing for the Kremlin to lose their own Russian ground over Ukrainian ground in the Donbass east. So it's something for the little guy at the top to consider what's better optics for himself, for the Kremlin, and for the country at large. And we could also put that into a different perspective, a further perspective for the Avdiivka sector in Ukraine's east, as it took Russia almost a year and between 70,000 to 100,000 WIA/KIA for the outcome of taking this 390 square kilometers or 150 square miles of Ukrainian land. Whereas Ukraine might be on track to double those gains within the space of 1 to 2% of that time, with personnel losses that wouldn't even rate as any sort of comparison. Then to some of the leading propagandists within Russia, as Russian state media TV wasn't feeling very comfortable either with these events, with Olga Skybeva not seemingly aware of the irony when she said that Ukraine invaded Russia. But in this longer clip, she also discovered that the Kremlin's math is not adding up, where Russian General Gerasimov said that Ukrainian attacks were all up mounted by just 1,000 troops, yet the Russian MOD claimed it's eliminated 1,000 Ukrainian troops near Kursk. But, as Skybeva said, they keep advancing. I guess those numbers are off. And it would also appear that the internal Russian blame game might be in full swing, with a Chechen Akhmat unit commander of the Russian forces calling the reason for the Ukrainian armed forces' breakthrough near Kursk being due to deception of the leadership by the generals. This is like Wagner 2.0, where you might remember, former Wagner leader Prigozhin, all he did was hammer into blaming the Russian MOD leadership when things went wrong. But nobody ever dares blame that little guy on top for fear of punishment. Although, back onto the topic of the Chechen leader throwing around blame, it's not exactly fair given that as soon as the Akhmat unit caught the slightest whiff of upcoming military engagements against the AFU, they simply fled further into the rear as fast as they could, which is at complete odds with how this TikTok army prides themselves on being fearless and mighty warriors. Then we also saw how Russian State Duma Parliament MP General Gurlev giving a sober assessment on the situation, stating that the Russian army won't be able to chase away the armed forces of Ukraine quickly from their own territory. We've got a real superpower right here, folks. It also appears that Russia's chief of the general staff of the armed forces of Russia was caught in his web of lies, or should I say, the forced condition whereby he was only allowed to give rosy reports to the Russian president due to Putin's lack of acceptance of anything else. As Gerasimov was reportedly aware of this incursion event 2 weeks earlier, but brushed it off as nothing. But even if he hadn't, there's not a great deal he can do when 98% of Russia's active military is unquestionably held or stuck in Ukraine's south and east. Russia's army was never able to turn on a dime like that. Then, very briefly on the map today, overnight, Ukraine's air defenses successfully repelled another large-scale Russian attack, downing all 4 North Korean KN-23 ballistic missiles, and 53 out of 57 Shahed drone attacks. Now, although the KN-23 ballistic missiles rarely, if at all, hit their targets, and sometimes just happen to explode mid-air on their own, their debris still poses a significant threat to the population of Ukraine. Then taking a quick look at the Black Sea as the Ukrainian Navy struck a Russian gas platform between Odessa and the Crimean Peninsula, which housed technical reconnaissance equipment, and so this type of event results in degraded intelligence gathering operations for Russia. So it was very much a win for Ukraine. So that's it for today, guys. A little bit of a different format at a moment. I'm mixing things up a bit, given all of those events occurring in the Kursk region, not to mention Belgorod now too. So thanks again for watching. Please continue to like and comment and subscribe if not already. And I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers!